Hey there, folks. Welcome to this week's astrological report for June 3 through June 9 of 2025. Hope you're all doing well. So this week we have a whole lot going on astrologically. There's a lot of different aspects happening. For the most part, every day of this week is mostly going to have a combination of both easy and challenging aspects. Besides today, actually, there's just a few difficult aspects here on June 3, Tuesday. And then on Saturday, June 7, there's just one challenging aspect, Moon square Pluto. But for the most part, there's some pretty positive stuff happening this week, some big energetic changes. And some of those things, one is that Venus here at the end of Aries is starting to make a sextile with Jupiter. That should be some good news coming in here at some point this week. And then that's going to lead to a change. Venus will ingress Taurus, its home sign, and become a lot stronger. And then at the same time, at the end of the week, the very end of the week here, it's kind of next week, technically Monday, June 9, Jupiter ingresses Cancer, where it's exalted. And that's kind of this transition into these more positive time periods that we're coming into. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be difficulties, like I said, kind of wrapped up into all this as well, because we do have some challenging aspects going on. We also have Mercury, though. There's a lot of mercurial aspects, so the mind is really stimulated this week. A lot of news and information is going to be coming out, and a lot of fateful news and information, because Mercury is T-squared the nodes of fate. That's going to be exact by June 5 on Thursday, but that's also when Mercury and Mars are connecting in a sextile. And let's see here, we also have Mars making an inconjunction to the North Node, also known as the quincunx. And then Mercury is sextile Chiron. That's on June 6th, Friday. And then we have actually Mercury and Jupiter making a conjunction in Gemini, very strong there, on Sunday, June 8th. So that's some really big information that's also going to lead to a turning point, because Mercury will be changing signs this week as well. So we have 3 planets changing signs, Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury. But Mercury Mercury will ingress Cancer right after that conjunction with Jupiter. So Jupiter is also reaching, the last degree right before it changes signs. That's a critical degree. So a lot of planets are reaching the 29th degree, which is an ending, a sense of urgency, and a turning point this week. And then after Mercury ingresses Cancer, it'll square Saturn and Neptune by next week. But like I said, we have this Jupiter ingressing Cancer, which is super positive. But we're still in kind of this transition period. We're not going to just see everything change instantly for the positive. It's going to take some time here, but things are in that process. So this week we have the moon waxing through the end of Virgo, we're still kind of in this first quarter moon phase between Virgo and Gemini. It's still a little bit of a challenge, especially today as I'm making this, because the moon is squaring Mercury. But then the moon is going to be waxing all through the sign of Libra this week, and that's going to try to also help the situation to bring more compromise, perhaps more balance, and then that leads to Venus changing signs into a better position. So I think there's going to be some big world stuff going on here too that leads to some positivity. The moon will then enter its debilitation in Scorpio, which becomes a little more intense things happening with the mood and the circumstances as the moon is waxing through Scorpio. Then the moon will ingress Sagittarius, and that's kind of the full moon vibes that are going to start coming in by Monday. But the full moon will be next week, not in this report week. So I'll talk about that in next week's report. But it's building up to that Sagittarius full moon, which is ruled by Jupiter. That will be in the sign of Cancer, exalted. So once we get to that full moon, that is the beginning of a lot more positive. So we're kind of in between. We're building up to that point by next week. So this week, I think a lot of big things are going to be happening, especially in regard to news and media information with all this Gemini going on. All right, so that's a lot of what we have here. Again, there's going to be a sense of urgency and some turning points with the 29th degree coming in strong with a lot of different planets here. So you can find all these aspects written out in the description. If you're new here, check all that out, and you can follow along throughout the week if you want to as well. So I'm going to start going through the chart day by day, starting here on Tuesday, June 3. We have the moon in Virgo here. We just entered the first quarter moon yesterday, where the moon and the sun are square. That's the crisis and action point, how to move things forward. But it all comes back to the mind, mercurial things. Both Gemini and Virgo is being ruled by Mercury. And the moon is squaring Mercury right off the bat here. Let me go back to this list. Yeah, today, like I said, today is a difficult day. Generally speaking, not everybody's going to be affected by it. But in the background, there's a lot of tension here because the moon is squaring Mercury. So it's still kind of that first quarter moon, the crisis and action point. There's challenges with how people feel versus what the focus and where the mind is. Now, Mercury's very strong here in Gemini, but the moon is in this kind of eclipse territory building up to the south node today. So today is actually a fateful day because the moon will be conjunct the south node right after it squares Mercury here. So that just means the circumstances are fateful, for good or bad. And that just means, like I've said so many times, whatever happens when fate is at play, it's going to have a long-term effect on the future. And in some cases that can be negative, in some cases that can be positive. It all depends on each situation. But generally, this is a little bit of a challenge between the heart and the mind today, especially first thing in the morning here, like right now as I'm making this report. They're exactly becoming square. So they're both ruled by Mercury. Mercury's in charge of it all, so there's a lot of information. There's a lot of mental stimulation, and things are kind of all over the place. And the moon here in Virgo wants to like narrow the focus, get down to the details of things and sort kind of the messiness out and figure things out that's being stimulated. So it's a little bit of a challenge on figuring things out versus how we feel about things, how we're thinking about things. And again, this can be kind of a fateful day in regard to these eclipse kind of areas. You know, once we get to September, this is where eclipses are going to be as well. So there's a lot of changes in this area of the zodiac that's trying to happen. Again, Virgo usually, generally speaking, deals with work and service and health issues. So for a lot of people, this could also be about health. That's, you know, on the mind or in the circumstances, or it could just be showing us what we need to purge, what we need to purify. What about everyday routine life? What needs to change in everyday routine life to make it better? You know, Virgo is definitely about improving things, but in this particular phase that we're in, it's about having to let go of things to improve things or purge things that are unnecessary, like I said. So kind of figuring everything out, sorting things out, getting down to the details. Organization is a big part of this. But we can sometimes feel a little bit discontent, you know, when the moon is next to the south node. We're not getting everything or not feeling everything quite, you know, as the way we would want it to. So again, it comes back to moon and Mercury square, the mind versus the feelings of things. Also, communications can be a little more challenging in this phase, especially the first part of today. Challenged in communicating how you feel and think and understanding yourself, and then other people understanding perhaps it's not that big of a deal. This is routine stuff and it's not going to last very long. But this is what we have happening first thing today. And then, like I said, as we move this forward, the moon is conjunct the south node, which kind of is the theme for all day long here. And that's going to be exact later on this evening. So it kind of sets the tone all day long, this challenging day here. So this day is more about work and getting practical, getting grounded, and trying not to scatter the energy too much or do too many variety of things here with the Gemini so strong going on. So the moon in the south node, like I said, that's this evening, so a fateful evening. Let's just say all day is fateful. Whatever happens can definitely have a long-term effect on the future. And it could still come back to information, communications, media, and things like that. It could be a variety of different things, actually, that's in regard to fate. And we also have the moon here tonight making an inconjunction, also known as the quincunx in astrology, to Chiron. So that usually indicates health issues, injuries that are also on the mind, or people dealing with health and other physical stuff going on with injuries. Last week I talked about Chiron being activated by Venus and Mars and all that, how it could be positive for some people and negative for others. And we definitely saw a lot of injuries, deaths that were happening when Chiron was being activated. Chiron in Aries can deal with head wounds and trauma, physical trauma, in a lot of ways. So it can be internal stuff, but it can also be physical stuff. And then with the moon in Virgo, that is, again, dealing with health in a lot of ways. So I think health should be a priority if that's relevant for you. It's not going to be relevant for everybody. It all depends on how these transits are aligning with your chart. But generally speaking, it's definitely about improving health by making changes to everyday routine habits and patterns. And that's the other thing that, generally we have to look at. What are our bad habits and our bad patterns that we need to change to make improvements for a better life? So these types of things can be coming up for people. And again, those are all the aspects we have for today on Tuesday, June 3. So moving this forward, we're going to start to see more changes coming in more and more energetically, especially here by tomorrow on Wednesday. We start things off with the moon at the last degrees of Virgo, first thing, pretty much the overnight hours of Tuesday into Wednesday morning. But there's going to be a mood change as the day goes on because the moon will be changing signs. But before it does that, on June 4, the moon is inconjunct to Venus. So this is where the mood and the feelings and the circumstances are not really on board with where the preferences are, the desires of things that are becoming critical. There's still a sense of urgency for the individual for getting what we want quickly, thinking more about the self than others. But that's a part of what's going to change here, is we're going to start to try to find more compromise, more balance between us and others as the week goes on. But in this moment, first thing in the morning, and again, it's super early, so I don't think it's affecting everybody here, we have the moon and Venus in conjunct, which can just be a sense of having to adjust between what's going on, the mood, the circumstances versus our personal desires. And it's a little more challenging to get what we want because, these planets can't even see each other. They're not working with each other. That's what the inconjunction / quincunx is all about, is having to make a lot of adjustments between these two different areas because they're not cooperating. They're not working against each other, but they're not helping each other either. So they're on their own, and yet they're both in play at the same time. So it can be an irritating aspect, and it can be an aspect, like I said, of adjustment that needs to take place between personal needs and desires really early in the morning. I think it's most relevant for people in Europe because it's first thing in the morning in Europe. Other people might be sleeping through this, but even that can show, sleep issues or things like that, generally speaking. But then the moon in Virgo trines down to Uranus at the end of Taurus here. So it's also for the people that this is relevant for, that are awake and living their life here. That's about making improvements in ways that could also deal with money and resources and the material physical life. By being innovative, by making changes happen, there can be good results in what you're doing. So that can be, again, around purging things, changing routines and habits and patterns. It can deal with health, management, how you manage certain things, organization and all that. Again, by trying new things and stepping outside the box from your normal routine, there can be good results. And we're just generally more comfortable with changes in that moment, really early in the morning here on Wednesday. But then the moon is squaring Jupiter. So again, there's a lot of different aspects going on. Things aren't going to last in the same way very long throughout the day. It's like, a couple hours could be one way and the next couple hours could be a different way. So this is all mutable. It's still a need to be very flexible and adaptable during this time period. In fact, that's most of what's going on. We have all this cardinal, which is about still the need to initiate things and make things happen independently. Then there's all this mutable, which is, again, being flexible and adaptable to changes. We're in between things here. And then Mars, building up to the last degrees of Leo, is still the more fixed placement here that can be a little more stubborn and holding on tight to things, a little more dramatic and passionate still. And that's going to increase for sure as Mars reaches the last degrees of Leo. But again, there's going to be a change. And that change is the next aspect. We call it an aspect in astrology. You don't have to get too technical. But the moon will be ingressing Libra as the day goes on. And that's going to be pretty much first thing in the morning here. Moon ingress Libra changes the overall circumstances in the mood. So now the moon in Libra shows that for the next 2.5 days, the mood and circumstances are being ruled by this Venus. And there's going to be a change within that 2.5 days because Venus will be changing signs from debilitation to its strength in Taurus, its home sign, where it's very comfortable and can offer us a lot more than it's been offering us here in Aries. But at first, we have to work out this change of mood and these feelings. So the moon coming into Libra is more about other people. But at first, it still comes back to the self with this sense of urgency building up for what we want. But there's still this need to be more intellectual, to be more fair and compromising with other people, to be cooperative. It's going to be challenging at first. It's not just totally easy because the moon is also building up the opposition to Saturn and Neptune, a part of this new era that we have to start getting used to, especially Libra. The beginning degrees of Libra has to really start to adjust to this new era of Saturn and Neptune opposition. That's more about the self than others. But here in this moment, we're trying to find a better balance between self and others. And that can be in the context of relationships, but it can also be in the context of just being more objective about things in this moment and trying to weigh things out. And trying to just find more harmony and balance in what we're thinking about and what we're doing here. But it generally puts more emphasis on relationships, especially one-on-one connections with people. However, because the moon is also going to be building up a trine to Pluto in Aquarius, and we have all this Gemini, this is a lot of social vibes that are going to start building up from this point forward as well, Wednesday, Thursday especially. So we have that big change of mood being ruled by Venus, moon in Libra here. And then we have the next two aspects is the opposition. Moon opposite Saturn comes in right off the bat. So right as the moon changes signs, we are picking up on a sense of responsibility, and looking at duty, commitment, obligations, trying to find that balance, but it still comes back to the self and needing to take responsibility for the self, needing to work hard on the self to make relationships better. It's not so much about trying to force other people to change so that we can have a better dynamic. It's about us making the changes. And that also requires a new level of boundaries that have been coming in with this change of Saturn from Pisces to Aries. The Pisces is more kind of feeling like waiting for someone to do all this for us, in a sense. Now it's no, if someone is not doing what you need for your own sake, then you need to be the one to put those boundaries up, to make the changes yourself, and just don't expect others to do it, make those changes. It's up to the self. And so people could start to feel this as the moon is in Libra, dealing with relationship stuff here. But on the other hand, I feel like this is going to be the beginning of some more positive news here, because again, this moon is being ruled by Venus, and Venus is now building up this sextile to Jupiter, which tends to show there could be some good news that starts to come out. There could be some news on the world stage as well about, peace talk or financial stuff that could seem more positive, and just general relationships between people, but also nation states could be trying to be more compromising this next 2.5 days from this point forward that could lead to some sort of a positive change. So I think there overall is some, big positivity about this, but we're still kind of picking up on the pressure of it all at first with the opposition to Saturn and then the Neptune component as well. Could be some confusion, some uncertainty that comes along with this new dynamic that people are feeling with others. So there's a sense that you have to just kind of go with it, make the changes without necessarily knowing the end result in this moment, but having faith in the self especially. That's a part of this new era, is having faith in the self. Neptune can often be where we idolize things, where we fantasize about things and just kind of glamorize. It's more about, again, the self in this new era, about what we do. That's what's going to really change lives in this new era, is what people do individually and not just make it all about the other people. So, we're going through that balance basically between self and others in this phase now as we're building up here through Wednesday. And this is all still taking place first thing in the morning. But then the moon, like I said, is trine to Pluto. So there begins to be a better power dynamic as well within certain relationships on Wednesday afternoon. And again, I think this could be really good for certain dynamics between nation states negotiating, and then even domestically, things can be coming in a little smoother here. It's still powerful. It's still an intense vibe in the air, but it also just connects more social connections going on as well that could lead to changes. So powerful mood changes, powerful empowerment could be happening too in certain cases. And then that leads to one of the most positive aspects of the week, and that is Venus and Jupiter sextile. So we have the two benefics, the two most positive planets in astrology, starting to communicate and work together and cooperate in some way. That leads to both of them entering a change of signs that's way more positive compared to where it's been. So again, I think that there's going to be really powerful information. This could be really good news, especially if you have any personal planets at the last 2 degrees of the air and the fire signs. Then you could be connected to this, especially if you have this very aspect sextile in your own natal chart. If you have a personal planet at 28 to 29 degrees of Aries and a personal planet at 28 to 29 of Gemini, then you already have this sextile in your birth chart, and then these two positive planets are activating that for you. So you could very well be getting some sort of positivity or good news out of this. I don't think everybody will, but in the general context for the world, there's definitely most likely to be some good news that comes about this. This could also deal with financial stuff that's at a turning point, some sort of information that leads to a change that could be more positive financially and things like that. It's also connecting the ability to get what we want, perhaps on different levels. Now, it's still not in the best position right now. Both of these planets are debilitated in this sextile. So there's still a limitation in the moment. It's more about the future and what's about to take place that, comes about from this connection now. So I don't think it's instant, but we're starting to get more positive about things, feeling more inspired, feeling like, yeah, we can get something we want here, that's starting to come in. Venus is still reaching, this critical degree of a sense of urgency for getting what we want quickly here. But you still have to be patient with everything despite that. So the day does end Wednesday evening. Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, I think, becomes a lot better, generally speaking. Now, there's still background stuff going on that, there can be positive and negatives at the same time. So people need to remember that it's not just one or the other, especially this week where we have a combination of these different aspects all at once. But I still feel like this could be one of the most positive connections going on here on Wednesday evening and Wednesday night, depending on where you live. So that's June 4. And then we move forward. We get to Thursday here, June 5. The moon is still in Libra, being ruled by this Venus, now reaching this last critical degree. So even this carries over into Thursday, still the same dynamic of trying to be more compromising, more balanced with how we're thinking, weighing certain things out, still about us versus other people, still this need to take the initiative, take responsibility, make things happen for the self. Don't just rely on everybody else to do it for you. And the day starts off, it's going to be a fateful day as well. The day starts off with the moon in harmony with the sun here. And that is later on Thursday morning, Thursday late morning, Thursday afternoon, depending on where you live here. So moon trine the sun, the way people are feeling, the circumstances of the day, and where we're focused are in harmony. We're on the same page with the inner and the outer lights. So things can generally be more cooperative, more flowing, less obstacles. But again, there can be obstacles in other ways as well. And again, it's a very fateful day, especially around news, information, media, because of Mercury T-squared the nodes of fate. So whatever's happening here, the news, the media, the thoughts, the ideas, communications with people, it's putting us at this fateful crossroads, which means we could be making decisions, based on what comes out. It could have a long-term effect on the future. So we have to look at the past. We have to deal with things of the past. We still have to look at work, service, health, purging, purifying, restructuring things, letting things go and all that. And we have to look at, things that are more private behind the scenes that isn't as obvious, that could also have an effect on the future. So we're at this crossroads between both. And Mercury is also sextile Mars in this dynamic as well, as Mars is in conjunct to the North Node. So there's a lot of different aspects. There's a little bit of an irritation. There's an adjustment that has to take place. Again, the in conjunction / quincunx to the North Node. It's like our action, we have to adjust to what's driving us, the passion, the instincts of what we're doing, versus things that are a little less clear behind the scenes of what's going on that could affect the future. And then Mercury sextile Mars can be pretty decisive as well. That's helping people have a lot more mental sharpness, strong communications, like I said, decisiveness with their thoughts, their ideas, their communication. It could still also be a little critical because Mars is in this critical aspect, and then, Mercury, Mars connecting. Mars is still Mars, and that could be a little critical for transportation, traveling stuff, or there could even be news or information that has an effect on the future about transportation, traveling, things like that. It could be a variety of different things, though, of what's coming out that's fateful and destined in a sense. But still, Mercury, Mars, it's much more of a sharper mind. People are more impulsively speaking their mind, but Mercury is sharp here. It's very strong, and Mars is pretty strong. So it can be, I think in this particular dynamic, it could be a lot worse. So I don't think it's like terrible, but you just have to be careful of impulsively speaking and just saying what's on your mind without, thinking about it. But then again, I think the moon over here in Libra that tries to be more diplomatic and graceful can be helpful in that regard as well. But it still comes right back to this Venus at these last minutes before it changes signs. So a sense of urgency is still in place here. So a very powerful mental stimulation for sure. Very powerful mind and circumstances are happening. And then, that leads to something's happening here that's fateful because it leads to Venus changing signs for the better. So it could also be about, again, financial things, something being said that's about either the markets, or it could be anything about financial energy, really. There could be something about laws, rules that's coming out, a change in policy, or something going on potentially that could have a positive result financially, generally speaking. Now, I don't think everything is just going to instantly improve financially or even with the markets. The markets are already doing well. I've already predicted this, that they'd come back up. They're not that far from all-time highs. Some stocks are already reached all-time new highs. But, again, it's only going to get better and better. We're still in that Jupiter-Saturn square that I talked about last week, though. We're still kind of in this moment of having to get past a challenge that's been restrictive and limiting for us. But that could also be a part of everything that's coming out this week and into next week that puts us at that turning point where the changes come in and we can start to expand into new territory in ways that we haven't been able to do in the past. We're not quite there yet, though, so you have to still be really patient with everything going on. But this leads to Venus ingressing Taurus, its home sign, as the day goes on Thursday afternoon. And that's going to be actually Thursday night, rather. Late on Thursday night, it'll be the early morning hours for other people on the East Coast, and then in Europe, it'll be the overnight hours into Friday morning. But on the West Coast here, it's Thursday night. So most of the day, Venus is in Aries in that sense of urgency for something trying to happen. And that can be also even on relationship levels. Like I said, there can be deals or agreements in new ways. And that can be on personal relationship levels. This could start to be a change for better relationship dynamics now, generally speaking. It all depends on your birth chart to get super, technical with if it's positive for you or not. But generally speaking, yes, this is going to be an improvement for relationships at this point. So now that Venus is in Taurus, it's just more happy. It's more compromising. It's able to give us what we want in an easier way, but it's not about doing things quickly. It's not this sense of urgency anymore to get something. It's more about getting grounded, getting practical, getting physical. Now Venus in Taurus is going to show that people have a change of preference coming in, generally speaking, too. What we want, what we desire is starting to change from this point forward here on Thursday night and then into Friday and beyond. So as Venus comes into Taurus, it is much more physical. It's sensual. It's like it's enjoying the five senses of pleasure, and really indulging in the human aspects of life. But it also increases desire for the pleasures of life and indulgences, money and resources. This also just creates a stronger desire for keeping things more beautiful, creating beauty around you, trying to create more harmony and beauty within relationships because the moon is still in Libra, being ruled by this strong Venus now. So this is going to start to slowly change the overall financial things going on in the world, including different markets that are being affected by this. I don't think, again, instantly, so we still have issues because of the Jupiter-Saturn square, which can still talk about, the economy that's at this turning point as well. So we have a better opportunity to feel more content, though, with relationships, generally speaking, and financial matters and where things are headed after some sort of more positive good news could be coming in. And then Mars is making that exact quincunx, the in conjunction, as I call it, to the North Node. And so there's still some edginess in the background that we may not know where it's coming from because, again, these two positions they're not working with each other, but they're affecting each other. So still, we have to make some sort of adjustment, on Thursday into Thursday night. with what drives us, what we're passionate about as well, our instincts, impulsiveness, and things like that. And now we have, a planet and one more planet in a fixed sign now. So things can slow down on one level. All right, so that's what we have there for Thursday night. Let me move this forward. And we get to Friday on June 6th. The moon is still in Libra. We have a lot of aspects going on this day as well. The first aspect is the moon in conjunct to the North Node. So again, having to adjust relationship matters that could have a long-term effect on the future as well. We could also have this circumstances talking about trying to be more diplomatic, more graceful, more charming, being a people person, trying to be objective and weigh things out, be more balanced, or deal with people and relationships versus this pull into the background, into our own world, distractions, or kind of a mood that isn't feeling it as much. It does look like there's a finger of God aspect here as well, though, on really early on Friday morning. It's tight enough to be definitely something going on here. So if you have a personal planet at the apex of 23, let's just say, between 23 to 24 degrees of Pisces, then you could be affected by this finger of God. Finger of God just shows that it could be something outside of our control. There's two in conjunctions going on, so there's a lot of adjustment that's happening on a karmic, fateful level in some way. But at the same time, the moon is connected to Mars. That can bring up more passion, more a desire for, like an impulsiveness and an instinct that could also have a fateful connection, or people are inspired or driven to do something without even thinking about it in some way that could be fateful, that could be connected to a higher power that's connected to everything going on. I don't think it's going to be relevant for everybody. I'm just saying, especially if you have a personal planet around 23 to 24 Pisces. And if you do, you already have the North Node of Destiny on that planet of yours for the first time in 18 and a half years. So there's already something fateful about that, and it could be activated here on Friday morning. So there's that. And then, like I said, the moon and Mars, that could just, really stir up the need for activity, doing things, but still trying to be diplomatic and graceful and charming about it, or, trying to find some balance in what we're doing here. But it could still be very passionate mood for people and very inspired in some way. And then the moon is also trine down to Mercury first thing on Friday. So this is where the mood and the mind are on the same page. They're cooperating with each other. They're in flow with each other. Again, it's intellectual, it's air. It's up in the head, but it's also about others as well. Relationship, communication, and information could be good on this day, first thing on Friday morning. If you have to communicate something to someone, if you need to publish something, anything like that, it could be a pretty good time to be doing that. And I would take advantage of it because there's going to be a mood change when the moon comes into its fall position here in Scorpio, which is a little more challenging. But before that happens, then the moon, we're on June 6th, so where was I there? The moon is opposite Chiron too. So even bringing up some of these sensitivities within relationship as well on Friday, late morning, Friday afternoon, that's starting to lead to this change. But then the moon is in conjunct to Uranus, so more adjustments have to be had here. Surprises, unpredictability, some disruptions are possible. There's just a lot of different energetics happening on the first half of Friday morning that leads to a change. But then the last aspect before that change is the moon trine Jupiter, as Jupiter has reached the last degree of Gemini. A sense of urgency for news and information and the need for growth and expansion, expanding the mind into new territory. But the mood is in more harmony with that. So there can be a sense of an optimistic vibe here that's happening. with others, or again, the way we're thinking. Plus, Mercury is building up to that conjunction. This is big news this week that's building up. Big thoughts, big ideas, strong communications are coming out. It could be the beginning of it here on Friday, but it's going to be even more so down the road as we get into the weekend. All right, and then we get this big change. And it's like right after this change takes place with the moon ingressing Scorpio, there's nothing but challenging aspects for the rest of the day. So something does seem to change here on Friday evening and Friday night, depending, it could be late Friday night for some people, and it's the evening hours on the West Coast around 7:30-ish as this mood starts to take place into Scorpio, where the moon shows that people are changing. There's a feeling, there's something changing here that feels more intense. As the moon comes into Scorpio, it has to pick up on a T-square with Pluto and Venus. That's the other thing, is even though Venus is in Taurus now, it has to get past this square with Pluto before it's really in the best energy of it. So there's still going to be some intense relationship and financial stuff that's still being worked out and at this turning point. But as the moon comes into Scorpio opposite Venus, it definitely deals with financial matters, markets, investment type of stuff, banking type of stuff. So it's really about money and resources on Friday. That comes in strong. It's just that for the rest of the day, the moon is in conjunct to Saturn, opposite Venus, and in conjunct to Neptune. So the moon in conjunct to Saturn, we're also having to make adjustments to responsibilities, especially about the self. Remember, it's all about the self in this new era with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Taking responsibility. But the moon in Scorpio, it can go either way. It could be a sense that people want a stronger connection. They want to go deeper. They want intimacy here with other on a deeper level. But that could be a little bit challenging to feel like we're getting everything we want for those people, especially that want a deeper connection because it's an opposition. But it could also be a sense of something coming to a head and a turning point within relationship dynamics that could turn into a deeper connection as well, because it hasn't been at its best, like I've said, with Venus and Aries. That's more about the self than others. So after all this dynamic change takes place this week, it could lead to deeper, more intimate relationships for some people. But I don't feel like it's going to be easy in this moment because we're making a lot of adjustments. There's still some limitations, some restrictions, and some uncertainty that we're picking up on emotionally with that moon in conjunct to Saturn and Neptune. But in other cases, the mood gets more private, even a little more secretive, depending, so it's just not as comfortable, the mood, the feelings of things. It's not the best to engage, in my opinion, it's really not the best time to have social events or things that are supposed to be pleasurable and enjoyable when the moon is going through Scorpio, because it just shows that there's an edginess, there's undercurrents, there's things that just don't feel as comfortable for people. Generally speaking, it doesn't mean that if you have a Scorpio moon, you can never have good stuff, or it doesn't mean that there can't be exceptions to that, but I'm just saying in general, when the moon is in Scorpio, it's fallen. It's not as easy for people. And it deals with the taboos of life, the deeper side of life. It brings up issues of death and loss, and transformation. That's not always comfortable for people. So it can also just be where people are more withdrawn and not wanting to be exposed as much, not wanting to put themselves out there because there's vulnerability issues and things like that, trust issues, and there can be stronger intuition as well for people as well, stronger emotions and feelings that are trying to be controlled. But there can also be stronger issues of manipulation and all those undercurrents, that's not as obvious. But for the most part, I think it's definitely something financial in the world that's taking place in a new way. So yeah, for whatever reason, Friday night, doesn't look like it's the easiest. And then we get to Saturday, and it kind of sets that tone too into Saturday, which is one of the more difficult days. Now, there's only one aspect here on Saturday, June 7th, and it's really early in the morning. The moon squaring Pluto. It's a force change, a force transformation. It's this intensity with community, group, and friendships could get really intense as well. So you have to kind of be careful of the more social dynamics here on Friday night and Saturday, especially the overnight hours of Friday into Saturday morning. If you are out late or something like that, I would not recommend. I would kind of be more cautious on Friday night in the overnight hours into Saturday morning. Know your surroundings and your environment and just be cautious of what's going on, because the social dynamic could get really intense and powerful. And there could be other intensities going on. It could be on different levels as well. Just emotional intensity, emotional power plays. This is where you'd have to be careful of manipulation and things of those undercurrents that could be coming out as well. But basically, it's a force change and force transformation to the mood and the circumstances from this point forward. And it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day because, again, the rest of the day has no major aspects going on. But we still have all this background stuff, so it doesn't mean that there's not going to be anything happening. It just means that kind of the Friday vibes into Saturday morning will carry through the rest of the day. And it's still deep and private on Saturday, intense, dealing with the taboos, like I said. It's just not, the mood is just not in that, the best harmony with the social friendship area of life on Saturday. So I'm sure there's going to be events that people, are going to or dealing with socially, and you just have to know the undercurrents. Now, again, it doesn't mean that every single person will have to experience something negative, because this is just the general background for the entire world, and there's going to be exceptions within that, of course, like there always is. So it really comes back to your own personal birth chart, and this is where knowing your own birth chart, knowing how these transits affect your chart every month can go a long way, and knowing if this is a good day for you personally or not. If you have a lot of planets in the beginning of Aquarius or Taurus or Leo, then this emotional dynamic on Saturday could be a little more tense for you. And then plus Mars, like I said, Mars is getting more and more intense, more and more passionate, more and more dramatic in the world as it's going through these last degrees of Leo. But it is building a trine with Chiron, so that's helpful on one level. All right, so that's pretty much Saturday, just this moon in Scorpio, square Pluto. So moving this forward, we get to Sunday on June 8th. Moon is still in Scorpio, and we start to get some big aspects here on Sunday, it looks like. So the moon is halfway through Scorpio. We're still dealing with the taboos, these undercurrents, issues of death, loss, transformation, financial things, investments, the need for intimacy for some people versus being more private and inward and guarded and trying to control situations, things like that. But we start to get the moon here in conjunct to the sun. So this is where the feelings and the mood is not in alignment with where the focus is. There's a lack of cooperation, generally speaking, first thing on Sunday morning. This is pretty early in the morning still, but they're just not even helping each other out. Again, the in conjunction, also known as the quincunx, is where they're not working against each other, but they're not trying to help each other. They're not even doing anything with each other. That's the problem. Is we have to adjust to both of these at the same time. We're focused on outward communication, information, doing a variety of different things, media, short trips, learning, teaching, just this more mental stimulation side, which is getting very strong because of Mercury and Jupiter, especially as the day goes on. But in this moment for a couple hours, first thing in the morning, the mood is like more inward, more guarded and reserved and private versus outward. So it's not that big of a deal. The moon goes around the chart every month and all these aspects take place. So it won't be the entire day because the communication, the mental stimulation is definitely going to take over because the next aspect on Sunday, June 8, is Mercury conjunct Jupiter, and then that leads to Mercury changing signs. So this is big. This is big information. This is people really going big with their thoughts, with their ideas, with their plans. But yeah, it's going to lead to a change in thoughts and ideas that's more reserved in a way. So it's like people are going over the top a little bit here. First thing on Sunday, the first half of Sunday. And then this is also, though, when Venus is, well, it's getting close. It's not exact on this day, but it's within orb. It's only a degree away, the Venus square Pluto. So that is going to be an issue. Again, I feel like the weekend is a little more challenging. Despite this big information, it doesn't really go anywhere, though, because Mercury, all this Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and so Mercury's in charge. It's right here. It's big news, big media, like I said, big information. So it could be good news in some cases. It's a sense of urgency, though, and it's a little bit critical because it is the 29th degree, and it is a sense of something ending that leads to a change in dynamics of thought and idea and media and all that as well. It could also deal with, like I said, this could be something about education, big, taking on something, initiating something changing about teaching or learning. This is big learning stuff here on Sunday, first half of the day. Let's say most of the day on Sunday. Could also deal with something about a big rig. This is like, I look at Mercury, Jupiter conjunct in Gemini as heavy equipment, big rigs and stuff like that. So I don't know the context of it necessarily, but it's something like, that could be coming up. And I feel like it may be a little bit intense because the moon is over here in Scorpio being ruled by Mars, connecting to Chiron as well. It's an interesting dynamic. There's a combination of both positive and negative, it feels like, at the same time. And there's fate at play as well. But the next aspect is actually Mercury. Mercury's moving pretty quick here, and that leads to Mercury ingressing Cancer. So that's why it's interesting. It feels a little more negative, I feel like for Saturday, Sunday, into Monday for some reason. But this leads to this change of Mercury. And Mercury coming into Cancer is a very different vibe than Mercury in Gemini here. Mercury in Cancer brings up this more conservative thought process, being more cautious, being more guarded and protective. Now, the way we're thinking starts to change into those ways. It's also less communicative, less outward, less mental stimulation, and it kind of gets wrapped up into emotions and feelings. So the way people are communicating starts to be much more emotional now. And Mercury's running into this brand new square with Saturn and Neptune that it's never experienced before. This need to really look at the self. Saturn doesn't like to take risk. That's part of the issue, of Saturn debilitated in Aries as well. Aries is all about starting things, taking a risk, being brave and courageous, making things happen quickly. Well, Mercury doesn't really want that, and Saturn doesn't really want that. So there's fear in some way that people could be dealing with, but it also just puts more focus on your home, your family life, property, living situation. Safety and security becomes a big thought process for people, generally speaking. And there's an issue with safety and security, it feels like, in this moment. Could be the weekend, could be Sunday here as this is happening. So kind of being forced to look at what needs to change, where we need to take responsibility, where we need to initiate big things for the self, but yet also having to factor in family and safety, security, and property, and border issues, I think, is a part of this, in the global stage. Immigration and border, there's something changing with that. There could be some new rules, some new laws, something going on. around immigration, it feels like. Now, this is going to smooth out with time. So this is not going to be long lasting, this issue that's coming up, but there is some sort of an issue coming up here on Sunday. So just be careful of the way you're thinking and feeling about things. We're starting to get much more feminine energy now with Venus in Taurus and Mercury coming into Cancer. The moon is still in Scorpio. So we had all this fire in this air, and we still have that, which is the bigger part of the new era. But in the meantime, we're having more of emotions and feelings, that we're also factoring in. So again, it's a little more fearful and cautious and reserved and conservative, and less of the ability to take a risk and be brave and courageous and daring and assertive. There's still that in the background in some cases because of this Mars, at these last degrees of Leo, can still be really passionate, still be, dramatic in its displays of its will as well and its power, but the mind is not on board with that at this point. And this Mercury is being ruled by the moon in Scorpio. The moon in Scorpio is being ruled by Mars, and the moon is building up a square with Mars. So it does look like things get critical for whatever reason, so just be a little more cautious, when you're going through this dynamic, and don't let your mind get caught up in fears and worry and pressure, because it will pass, whatever's coming up. And there is still an aspect of Mercury Venus, that's not that far away, that's looking at money dynamics, but there's still a financial thing and a relationship thing here that could also be a little bit intense, especially around friendships and group and community stuff. So be a little more cautious when you're dealing with friends as you're going through this weekend and into next week with this Venus-Pluto square building up. And then the moon here is connecting to the nodes of fate too. Now it's in an easier way where fate is just playing out. There's nothing blocking it. There's no major crossroads or decisions about what this is. It's just happening, but it's fateful, whatever's happening. It's affecting the long-term future. But we're also having to deal with the future, but also things of the past, continuing to look at what needs to change, patterns, habits, routines, health. There's still stuff coming up here that we have to look at that we need to change for the future. But the last aspect on Sunday night is Moon square Mars. That's dramatic with Scorpio and Leo square. It's always the most dramatic, but it's impulsive, it's fiery, it could be manipulative. So just check yourself. Don't get wrapped up in any kind of impulsive action that could be, destructive in any type of way. There's a lot of tension on multiple levels. I think just generally with people, there's a lot of tension here on Sunday night, and then even on the earth level. There could be a lot of tension. Remember, the moon has a lot of light on it. It's building up to that full moon within a few days of this. So there's a lot of pressure building up that leads to a major turning point by next week. But it's impulsive. It's just a little dramatic of whatever's happening here, especially the fact that this Mercury is squaring Saturn and Neptune at the same time, and Venus is close enough to that square with Pluto. So there's a lot of tension here on Sunday night. I would just play it safe and be very conscious of all this and what's going on, and observe other people and how they're reacting, because other people don't know astrology, And this affects everything. Everything on Earth is affected by astrology. It's not that astrology is making it happen. I just want to make that clear for the new people. Astrology doesn't make anything happen. It just is a reflection of what is happening and what will happen, in a sense, from a higher power. But even animals are affected by this kind of stuff, that it's showing that everything is going through a lot of tension. So there can be strong emotional reactions, basically. And I would say especially for women, if you think about it, because the moon, is wrapped up into this, and then Venus is wrapped up into this. So be extra cautious around angry women, Sunday into Monday. And don't feed the fire. So that's what we have. I just report the good and the bad. Don't blame me, for being too negative about this. I'm just showing you the astrology. So moving on here, we get to Monday on June 9. And we have a lot of aspects for Monday here as well. Yeah, there's all kinds of aspects, both positive and challenging on Monday. And there's going to be a mood change. The moon starts off at the last degrees of Scorpio, still in stabilization here. The moon is in conjunct to Chiron, bringing up, some sensitivities that came out with all this that we're adjusting to, vulnerabilities and sensitivities. And then this is where Mercury is exactly square Saturn, first thing early morning hour. So I think it's Sunday night carrying over into the morning hours of Monday. Mercury square Saturn, like I said, is fear and worry, the need to be more cautious and reserved in this moment, thinking more about, it's the self versus home and family stuff in a lot of way. Taking responsibility for the self could lead to some issues with home and family. What needs to change? With this Saturn on the cardinal point like this, it affects all areas of the chart, including work and career goals and ambitions. It affects the self the most, and then it affects home and family stuff, and it affects relationships. Things are changing, and it all comes back to the self and what the self needs to do. But Mercury here, like I said, in Cancer, it's more about safety and security issues that are coming up, fear and worry and pressure for some reason. So don't let your mind get wrapped up into that. Just try to process and think things out. And I think the moon coming into Sagittarius could be helpful, but sometimes when the moon comes into Sagittarius, when there's other intense aspects going on, things can get really amplified and really over the top. I've seen it before. It's not always positive. Generally, the moon coming into Sagittarius from Scorpio is a more positive, optimistic kind of vibe that starts to come in, but other times it just amplifies whatever's happening to be over the top. So first thing in the morning is that square, and then the moon is also opposite Uranus at the same time, which can show, again, something happening that's not normally happening. Something disruptive is possible. Surprises, unpredictability, mood changes, mood swings for some people. Financial stuff, I think, is definitely here on Monday, something critical financially maybe, even though whatever's happening, it's still going to lead to more positivity. But remember, Jupiter's about to enter Cancer as well, squaring that Saturn, that final big dynamic with the economy. There's still going to be some issues that we have to work out on the world stage with markets and the economy overall. That's going to be coming up. This final turning point, and that full moon in Sag is going to be a big turning point, especially for the United States, because that's the full moon coming up for the United States once a year. It's Sagittarius full moon. Sagittarius is the first house for the United States. All right, so with that, just the early morning hours looks a little intense before the things start to change for the better. And then that moon is also in conjunct to Jupiter at this last few minutes, this critical degree around information, media, news, this sense of we want to expand and grow and move into new territory, but what's this block? What are we being restricted by? What is the limitation? We start to get a good idea of what that limitation is, that's been preventing growth and expansion. And we could overcome it after we have this consciousness, because again, the moon is there's a lot of light on it. We're building up a lot of consciousness and awareness to this next full moon about a lot of stuff that's been in the background. And then the moon changes signs as the day goes on Monday. So the first part of when I believe the markets are open if there's no holiday here on Monday, but the first part of the day is going to be probably different than the second half of the day for the markets. I would imagine the markets start off a little bit critical here, and they could be critical maybe just because of Venus here all day long is squaring Pluto as well. So be cautious around day trading or anything like that on Monday. It could be a lot of volatility that's happening here. But again, I do believe it's leading to positivity. That's the bigger interpretation of it all. So the moon comes into Sagittarius. Now it's being ruled by this Jupiter that's about to change signs. So things are starting to get big. And now we're in a better alignment, though, with the circumstances, the mood, the feelings, with the group and the community, the politics and friendships and the self, the ability to feel more comfortable with taking responsibility for the self and being inspired to start big things for the long-term future. But it's all about the self that has to do it. It's nobody else. Nobody else's responsibility but ours. If you want your life to change, you take the responsibility and make it change. Don't just wait for something to fall into your lap and happen. Take the initiative. But the moon, the feelings here, coming into Sag, this starts to be a lot about the world. The moon is going to be going through Sag, Capricorn, and Aquarius next week, which deals with the more outer world, politics, cultural stuff. Moon in Sagittarius gives a bigger need for information as well, opposite this Gemini full moon coming up here. The Sagittarius full moon opposite the sun in Gemini. It's kind of like the full moon vibes are starting from this point forward. Everything is big. Feelings are big. Things can be over the top for good or bad, and someone asked in the comments, what does that mean? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's like for good or bad. You could have big feelings about something that are very positive. You could be going over the top with making something a big deal in a positive way. Or it could be the other way. You could be making a big deal about something that's negative and kind of being over the top about it. But the moon here generally is more positive. And the moon in Sagittarius generally wants to be more lighthearted, more playful, not too serious about things. It likes to joke around and be the smart ass. It likes to, have adventure, travel. It likes to learn things, teach things, explore, more cultural stuff, world stuff, all that kind of stuff, educational stuff. This is going to be a full moon around education too. There could be something that starts to come out next week that's a big turning point for institutions around educational stuff, either lower or higher levels. So big decisions, laws, rules, something changing in that way around education is possible. But again, I feel like there's outlets now for some of this tension that was building up through the weekend. With the Mercury, though, be extra careful of transportation and traveling issues, even though I think there's a strong mood and desire, or even circumstances for a lot of people could be around traveling. I still feel like with this Mercury square Saturn and Neptune, definitely be careful. Give yourself plenty of time if you're traveling. Don't, try to let go of fear and worry, basically. Don't let this get carried away around fear and worry. But now, this is changing too, because Mercury in Cancer is being ruled by this moon, and it just came into this bigger sign, this more outward sign. So there's definitely something going on, but we'll have to see how it plays out. It's hard to predict exactly what's going to play out, obviously. All right, so then the moon is trine Saturn, and then that's also when Venus is perfectly square Pluto. So I think friendships could be going through something here. It's not going to affect every single person. If you do have a personal planet around 2, 3, 4 degrees of the fixed signs, then you could be affected by this. And then just generally, there's some intense social dynamics around money, funding around certain events, issues around funding organizations in some way, and some intense politics, especially even something with a woman going through some intensity. Something with the markets, like I said, is going through something, change, turning point. It feels like it's intense, but on the other hand, it feels like it could be good news too. It's kind of a contradiction. There's both. There's positive and negatives all wrapped up in the same dynamic in some way. So Venus square Pluto can also show really intense desires too, or even some issues, some sexual issues, inappropriate things with friends or stuff too can get kind of carried away, or obsessiveness within relationship as well, or a personal desire where you're getting really obsessed with something that you want, that you desire. It's a little bit out of balance here. You have to be careful of that. I just think with this Mercury square Saturn at the same time and Venus squaring Pluto, there's definitely some big stuff happening on the world stage, with nation states, with agreements, deals, laws about to change in some way, legal stuff too, I think could be a part of this. In some cases, some big legal stuff going on, especially on the world stage, and it can be on individual levels as well. And then the moon is in conjunct to that Mercury as it's going through Sagittarius. The moon wants to be lighthearted and take things easy, but it's a little difficult with all this background intensity going on. So we have to adjust to it. We have to adjust to money, relationship stuff here. It's not easy to get everything we want in this moment either. The moon and Venus aren't even helping each other out at all. They're not working against each other, but they're not helping each other. And then the moon is trine Neptune. So we're more on board with, again, freedom and independence in this phase. It's not so much about others and trying to get what we want with others. But here's that big change now. This definitely is going to start to change something in a big way with Jupiter ingressing Cancer. Now we have the two best planets in their two good signs. Jupiter loves to be in the sign of Cancer here. Jupiter's going to be in Cancer for the next year. So there is a change. Look at your chart. Where do you have the sign Cancer? You're not going to just instantly see all the benefits of this because Jupiter has to get past the square with Saturn and Neptune before we really see the benefit. But it's still the beginning process of a positive transit in your Cancerian area of life. And you have to give it time. It's more in hindsight when you look back at this next year from summer or from June of 2025 until, a year from now, 12 months or so. When you look back, you'll see that there was opportunity here. So it all depends on your birth chart and what is Cancer for you. Now we have two planets there. There's starting to be a bigger focus on Cancer, that area of your life that deals with home, generally speaking, home, family, safety and security issues. But Jupiter is happier here because generally the moon is more about caring and nurturing and, emotional stuff. And Jupiter is a good planet. It wants to expand the good stuff, and it's easier to expand, goodwill and emotions and feelings and nurturing and healing. This is a great transit for healing. If you are going through some sort of a major illness or something, then this gives you hope. This gives you a chance at healing in a better way than you otherwise would. Now, it's still going to be an issue if you're going through a health issue because Saturn and Neptune are also a part of this. It's like, again, coming back to the self and having to work on the self in a major way. But Jupiter still wants to bless people. It's just not going to be instant. It's going to take time to build up this momentum of goodwill and just able to get what we need in an easier way. There's more luck coming to your life wherever you have the sign Cancer. Now, in some cases, some people, Cancer is at odds with their chart. It's not easy, and Jupiter will be making squares and oppositions to you. In that case, you're going to have to step outside your comfort zone. There's going to be tension in that process, but there could still be help, and opportunity and luck that's trying to come in. Now, this is a great transit for if you need to deal with home and property stuff. If you want to sell a home or buy a home, it's only the beginning stages, so don't think it's going to instantly happen. And you might have to take on a big commitment, in some way to get the benefit of all this. But it can be better for home and family. It's also a transit that, now I will say, especially with these squares going on to Saturn, this could be natural disaster or other critical events that could happen, but yet bring people together and support with each other. I see this a lot, even in the United States. There could be some critical event here, on a natural level or otherwise. It's not always natural either. It could be, an attack. It could be something pretty critical that could happen. But then it could lead to a change for, again, people coming together and supporting each other, based on whatever happens. So in some cases it can be negative, but then turn into positive. Other cases, it can just be a turning point. It's an economical thing too, because again, this is the final square. Now, with that said, Jupiter is no longer debilitated. It's positive. It's stronger than Saturn and Neptune. But we're also building up this square with Neptune and Jupiter of belief systems. What's real? What's true? And also, it's Saturn is weaker than Jupiter. So there's a stronger positive than there is a negative, and we can overcome the obstacles, the challenges, the blocks, the restrictions that have been in place for a while. Just don't expect to see it instantly is my point. It's just a turning point for all that. But it does feel like this weekend into next week could have something a little bit critical taking place in the world, unfortunately. And I hope it doesn't manifest like that, but it very well could. But overall, look at where you have the sign Cancer in your chart and just know that that's where there's going to be a lot of growth and expansion for the next year in that area of your life. And I think overall, this can be very helpful for family dynamics, improving family type of stuff. It's also going to be big new immigration. It could be a big new rule or law with this Saturn Jupiter. I think this is also something with legal stuff, especially on the world stage, but it's definitely legal law kind of stuff that's changing in some way probably as well. So I'll talk more about this as we, go through this new Cancer transit. Time goes on, this new Jupiter in Cancer, but that's kind of what I'm seeing that this change is leading to. All right, and then the moon sextile Pluto, so it's connecting to the group, the community, politics, science and technology, friendships, group, and all that. And this moon has a connection to what's going on down here with some sort of legal thing or something changing, most likely. Or, again, it could be a critical event in the world. And then the moon is in conjunct to Venus, like I said. And then the last aspect of the day is Mercury square Neptune in this brand new dynamic that we haven't had before. So this is where we have some uncertainty about everything going on right here. We're not clear about it all just yet. There's a lot of changes taking place that we have to figure out, and it's like a full moon vibe that's already starting. I'll talk about the full moon in next week's report, which is, again, going to be a huge turning point for the United States in some way here. But Mercury square Neptune, it's intuitive. We're trying to figure something out. It's not so much about logically trying to figure out. It's about intuitively trying to work out feelings about things and understanding things. And again, I think it just leads to uncertainty, a little bit of doubt or confusion, and you have to just go with the flow. It's also cardinal. This still is about big new things that are starting and happening. But there's fear, there's uncertainty about it, there's worry about it, where you have to take the action even if you don't know the end result. Just have faith in the process as well. So we'll get more clarity as we get to next week for sure about what all this is talking about. But it does feel like things get pretty intense as we get to the weekend and beyond. And even some throughout this week, like I said, there's a combination of both easy and challenging all days throughout the week. So hang in there, everyone. The world is at a huge, huge turning point. And again, things are going to start to improve because overall we still have the positive planets in positive signs now. And we can start to get more and more of what we want once we get past this full moon. And especially once we get to the Cancer new moon, that's going to be one of the most positive cycles of the year. One of the most abundant, one of the most expansive cycles that we get to. But we still have a couple weeks of dealing with this Gemini cycle before we truly get to the most abundant time, later on in June, July, and beyond. And the fall is really going to be a time when Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune are all trine. Everything kind of smooths out, and we are able to expand in a lot of new ways that we haven't been able to. So this is only the very beginning stages of that. So just know that you still have to be patient. if you want something, but it is the turning point. And just keep the Venus Pluto in mind. Like I said, money, friendships could also be going through some intensity, some power struggles. There could be some financial things somehow connected to group, community, science and technology, friendships, like I said, markets, and then just the overall relationship power dynamic of intensity with relationships in general. Just for a little bit. It won't last. All right. I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for watching. I hope it's helpful. And I'll catch you on the next one.